disgraced former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, is challenging the disgraced mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, as Eric Adams seeks re-election as New York City mayor this year. Andrew Cuomo was forced to resign as governor of New York back in 2021. Last January, the Biden Justice Department concluded Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed at least 13 women during the 8 years he was governor. The Biden Justice Department, he was reelected 3 times during the last 8 years of his leadership as governor. He sexually harassed at least 13 women. That's according to the Biden Justice Department, which called his behavior egregious, saying women were subjected to groping, verbal, and sexual harassment, and of course, punished for complaining. Cuomo denies all of this, and the fact that he's running for mayor of New York City is dispositive proof that he's an abuser. One would think after 13 women came forward, you would change course and pursue a different career. Little introspection, perhaps, Andrew Cuomo? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, one of my favorite politicians ever. You might remember him as Kamala Harris's running mate last year. Tim Walz says he's not running for Senate. Democrat Tina Smith announced she's not running for re-election in 2026. So Walz, everybody thought, was going to run for her seat. He's not. Some are now calling on Al Franken to run for his old seat, which Tina Smith now holds. But like Andrew Cuomo, Al Franken was forced to resign. In his case, at least 8 women that we know of accused Al Franken of improper sexual behavior. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds announced he's running for governor of Florida. Donald Trump has already endorsed him. Donalds was born in New York City, where, because he's black, was arrested in 1997 for marijuana possession. Why? Because Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of our city. And yet, Byron Donalds is still a Republican. Rafael Caro Quintero, a founding member of the Sinaloa drug cartel, has been extradited to the United States and will face charges for killing a DEA agent in 1985. Quintero has already been convicted of the murder in Mexico and was released after serving 28 years. Mexico also agreed to send nearly 30 other cartel leaders to America to face charges of drug smuggling. Well, speaking of the drug cartels, I owe Donald Trump Jr. an apology. I do. On my last show, I quoted him as saying he's on the side of Russia, not Ukraine. I fell prey to artificial intelligence, and thanks to several of my listeners, I was informed that the audio of Don Jr. was completely altered. Don Jr. never said, I honestly can't imagine that anyone in their right mind would be picking Ukraine as an ally when Russia is the other option. The U.S. should have been sending weapons to Russia, unquote. So, he never said that. He thought it, but he never said it. My apologies for passing along audio of Donald Trump Jr. that had been created by artificial intelligence, thereby marking the first time in history the words Don Jr. and intelligence have been used in the same sentence. In other words, he's an effing idiot. And that's why we need to rely on trusted news sources like my listeners. Thank you for telling me that was fake. Trusted news sources like Forbes, which is now reporting Trump media paid Donald Trump Jr. $813,000 in 2024 to attend 2 meetings. He sits on the board of directors of Trump Media. How do you get that job? And he's supposed to attend 5 meetings via Zoom. That's it. For $813,000 a year, he only was able to show up for 2 of the 5 meetings. but they paid him $813,000 last year to show up for 2 meetings. Forbes reporting that Truth Social, which paid, did I mention this, Don Jr., $813,000 in 2024, Truth Social lost $401 million the very same year, with a total revenue of only $3.6 million. But tell me again how DEI is the problem in corporate America. Despite hemorrhaging money, racking up $401 million in losses last year, with no income, a couple $1 million in income, Trump Media now has a market cap of roughly $6 billion. But let's give a tax break to the billionaires so their kids can inherit money, jobs, and salaries they don't deserve, so they can kill endangered ducks on hunting trips to Venice. Donald Trump Jr. visited Venice, Italy, in December to hunt fowl. I mean, why else would you go to Venice? Everyone knows the only reason you go to Venice is to kill endangered duck. Trump's New Jersey strip mall lawyer, Alina Habba, is now serving as an advisor in the White House, and she told reporters, our president is, quote, running America like he runs his businesses. Seriously, she said that. She said, this is what she said on Friday, and I quote, this is what we're about. We're running this country like President Trump runs the Trump Organization. Help me, God, please help me. She continues, and if you want your budget balanced, if you want to not have a deficit, who better to do so than a businessman who understands how to make money? Oh, I get it. She's thinking of the other President Trump, the one who didn't bankrupt 6 businesses. She goes on to say Donald Trump is, quote, a businessman who knows how to spend money. Yeah, ours. And, she said, how to get out of debt by declaring bankruptcy and not paying back his creditors. She goes on to say, and that's what we're going to do. Yeah, we're going to bankrupt the country. That's what you're going to do. That's pretty much what he did in 2020 when he crapped the bed on COVID. Headline, Washington Post, February 28th, 2024, a little more than a year ago. Trump said he had $400 million in cash. Now his lawyers say bond is a struggle. You might remember a year ago, he was found guilty of inflating his wealth in order to secure favorable interest loans on the hundreds of millions of dollars he had to borrow to stay afloat. That's fraud. And he was ordered to pay roughly $500 million to the state of New York. And Alina Habba went before the judge and said, we can't, it's impossible for him to come up with $500 million. This is from ProPublica, April 5th of last year. It's amazing how quickly people forget. April 5th, 2024, wasn't even a year ago. His lawyers had told the appellate court it was a practical impossibility. That would be Alina Habba saying it was a practical impossibility to get a bond for the full amount of the lower court's judgment, $464 million. All of the 30 or so firms Trump had approached balked, either refusing to take the risk or not wanting to accept real estate as collateral, they said. That made raising the full amount, quote, an impossible bond requirement. According to reporting in the New York Times, final figures show Trump, in his first term, added $8.4 trillion to America's national debt. By the time he left office, he was responsible for at least 1/3 of our entire national debt. no president in 4 years or 8 years racked up as much debt for our country as Donald Trump. And yet, somehow, he's back in the Oval Office. And now, he and his Republicans are planning to give the richest 1% a $4 trillion tax cut with absolutely no way to pay for it other than racking up even more debt and blaming Democrats for the debt because Democrats don't want to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and Social Security. They just passed a bill that raises the debt ceiling by about $5 trillion. More debt. Again, $4 trillion. The party of fiscal responsibility that crashed our economy in 2020, 2008, and of course 1929, wants to give a $4 trillion tax cut to the rich, even though every time they give a tax cut to the rich, they end up ballooning our debt and crashing the economy. Every time. But people who sell tobacco insist it doesn't cause cancer. People who sell oil insist it doesn't destroy the climate. People who sell health insurance insist it doesn't destroy medicine. And people who sell a massive tax cut for the richest 1% insist it doesn't destroy the economy. Why do they say all this despite the evidence to the contrary stacked against them? When there's money involved, you will have no trouble finding charlatans, swindlers, and demagogues willing to say with absolute certainty, there's no shark. The beaches of Amity Island are perfectly safe. Enjoy your 4th of July weekend. A $4 trillion tax cut for the richest 1%. Half this country can't come up with $500 for a medical emergency. So Trump taps into the fear and anger that flows from this financial precarity so many Americans feel. He taps into it by shifting the blame over to the migrants. And now he's blaming Ukraine, the EU. They're all taking advantage of us. Well, we're certainly being taken advantage of. He's got that right. But it's not the migrants. It's not Europe, NATO, Mexico, Canada, or Zelensky. It's everybody inside Trump's cabinet. That's who's not just taking advantage of us, they're robbing us blind, all under the rubric of fiscal responsibility. They've already voted to raise the debt ceiling by about $5 trillion. The party of fiscal responsibility. And of course, they also blame what they call our bloated civil service. Musk and Trump have right now millions of Americans who can't come up with $500 for a medical emergency. They have these people, some of them convinced it's because it's the government's fault that they can't come up with $500 for a medical emergency. It's the civil service stealing from us. Dead people are on salary. No proof, but dead people are being paid by the federal government to do nothing. Dead people are collecting Social Security, says Elon Musk, even though the head of Social Security appointed by Donald Trump says that's a lie. Well, the truth is the civil service is not stealing from us. Privatizing government jobs, that's stealing from us. Defoliating our civil service and replacing competent, loyal Americans with private contractors who charge 3 times as much for 10 times less efficiency, that's stealing from us, and that's the plan. To cut taxes for the richest 1% and rack up more debt by firing the civil service and replacing those workers with Trump and Musk cronies. Firing federal employees is about increasing not decreasing, increasing the debt. This is about privatizing government, which is more expensive and less efficient than what we have right now. As I pointed out many times before, 1/5 of America's entire economy flows through the Treasury Department's payment systems. When you add in other sources of federal spending, plus local and state government, by my calculations, 40% of our entire economy is what government spends. So the people behind Project 2025, they're opposed to government spending and government waste unless that government spending is wasted on them. Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, has delivered a 26-page plan to privatize ICE. He wants in on it. He says he can do it better than ICE. Prince told the Trump administration that for just $25 billion, he can set up a program that will remove 500,000 immigrants a month for only $25 billion a year. That's $25 billion. Of course, he's going to need, he says, Army bases to provide temporary housing for migrants. He's going to need other government employees, but he says, I can do it cheaper and better than the United States government can. Sure you can. The last time Donald Trump soiled the Oval Office, Prince proposed privatizing the war in Afghanistan by turning it over to him. He said America could win if the war was being fought for profit. When has a war ever not been fought for profit? The Hill reporting that right before leaving office the first time, Donald Trump had to pardon 4 Blackwater mercenaries charged with manslaughter for the killing of 17 Iraqi civilians in 2007. After firing close to 7,000 workers last year, our Internal Revenue Service announced they have plans now to close 110 taxpayer assistance centers right around April 15th. Because everybody knows that's how you balance the budget, by making it impossible for Americans to figure out how to pay their taxes. This is not about making people hate just the IRS. It's about making Americans hate our entire government and creating the false impression that government is inefficient. It's an old trick dating back to the Reagan administration. It's what Republicans always do now. Take a perfectly functioning government agency, destroy it to better convince the American people, see, government doesn't work. The IRS is smaller today than it was 40 years ago. We've got about 30,000 fewer employees over at the IRS than we did 40 years ago, despite our population growing by about 60 million. We have more Americans and fewer IRS employees. Government needs to get bigger, not smaller. This is from the Washington Post. It's an edict handed down by its owner, Amazon's Jeff Bezos. He has told the paper's editorial board to only push opinion pieces that support the free market. He said, we're all about the free market. Well, there's no such thing as a free market, and Jeff Bezos knows that. He just doesn't want you to know that. I just told you our economy is 40% of what the government spends. When you add in regulations that keep our food, drugs, air, water, highways, and investments safe, only a con artist would preach the virtues of a free market. The market is not free. It's what government decides it is. And like I said, you know who knows this? Jeff Bezos. He just doesn't want you to know that. So Jeff Bezos, this homunculus, can continue to manipulate the government for his own benefit. It's why Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. He bought the Washington Post to influence Washington. Amazon is headquartered in Seattle. He didn't buy the Seattle Times. He bought the Washington Post to influence our federal government. Why? Because Amazon sells billions of dollars worth of cloud services to our federal government, among other things. Plus, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos sells rockets to our government so we can go to the moon. Jeff Bezos would be nothing without government subsidies, government contracts, and an IRS so underfunded it lets him get away with not paying taxes. Amazon was founded in 1994. It wasn't until the end of 2001, 7 years later, that Amazon recorded its first quarterly profit of a few $1 million, and then it went back to losing money. For 3 months in 2001, Amazon turned a profit and then went back to losing money, while destroying Main Street USA. In 2003, Amazon had its first profitable year, and then it went back to losing money, while continuing to decimate Main Street USA. Founded in 1994, not until 2015, 21 years after Amazon was founded, after Main Street USA was completely gutted by Amazon. By 2015, you couldn't find a record or a bookstore. 21 years later, Amazon finally began to consistently earn a profit quarter after quarter, year after year. It took 21 years for Amazon to become a profitable corporation. What was its secret? How did it stay afloat? The government. Jeff Bezos manipulated the government so that he, unlike his competitors, didn't have to pay sales taxes. Well, actually, his customers didn't have to pay sales taxes because our government decided we need to help this new industry that's destroying small-town America. Jeff Bezos was able to undercut every bookstore, every record store, practically every mom-and-pop clothing store on Main Street USA because the government, by law, made it so American consumers could shop on Amazon without having to pay a sales tax. Unlike shopping on Main Street, where you do have to pay a sales tax. So he decimated Main Street. And the only reason he was allowed to do this was because of our government. The government said, your customers, unlike every other customer in America, doesn't have to pay sales tax. That's how Jeff Bezos was able to keep prices so low. And the government intervened, whereas, brick and mortar stores have to worry about paying leases and making sure the streets are clean. Jeff Bezos, Amazon is a brick and mortar operation. It's brick and mortar. Warehouses, trucks. They get tax breaks. When they want to open up a warehouse, they get paid by cities to open up warehouses that pay substandard wages. We're going to give Jeff Bezos and Amazon tax breaks, incentives to bring low-paying jobs to our city because that's all that's left. He destroyed Main Street USA. The government does that for him. The last thing someone like Jeff Bezos wants is government getting out of the way, right? The new policy at the Washington Post is push the idea of the free markets, government getting out of the way. But the last thing Jeff Bezos ever wants is the government to get out of the way. Oh, believe me, he wants government in the way as blocking tackles to make sure people like Bezos win and Main Street USA doesn't, to make sure he wins and everybody else loses, including his employees. Thanks to our government, he gets to treat his workers like crap. The drivers are peeing in Gatorade bottles. Why? Because he and the Republicans have succeeded in defoliating the National Labor Relations Board. That means Amazon can violate nearly 70 years of labor law and prevent workers from organizing even though they voted to join a union. Who do you think makes that possible? The government, by not enforcing 70 years of labor law. The Washington Post, which has journalistic independence, its editorial page does not have independence, but it's still a great newspaper. Subscribe to the Washington Post. If you cancel your subscription, Jeff Bezos is worth, what, $300 billion? Do you think you're hurting Jeff Bezos canceling your subscription to the Washington Post? That's not. The Washington Post is one of the great newspapers. It still is. Just don't read its editorials. The Washington Post reported this last week. They reported that Elon Musk's fortune comes from $38 billion in government loans and contracts. You read this article, you realize that Elon Musk would be nowhere without early funding from the federal government. $38 billion in government loans and contracts. I've been over this. I told you how Tesla was going belly up in 2008, but thanks to Obama's stimulus plan, he was able to get low-cost loans backed by the United States government. And but it's in the Washington Post now. I told you this 3 weeks ago. I have it easier. I'm being serious. It's easier for me than it is for the reporters at the Washington Post because they have a filtration system. They do their research and they got to go through an editor and then another editor. It does make their work more authoritative than the crap I spew. But I told you all this 3 weeks ago. That's the benefit of being a one-person operation. You do your research and you go with it. You don't have to run it through a million gatekeepers. Here's another example of how the billionaires suck off the government teat while calling the people who work for the government parasites. The FAA, that's the people who keep the planes up in the air, they are canceling Verizon's $2.4 billion communications contract. And for some reason, I don't know why, they've decided to hand that contract over to the Starlink satellite company. I wonder who owns Starlink satellite. Oh, right. Elon Musk. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is begging retired FAA workers to come back to work. For some reason, they're pissed off at the government. Did something happen? Did Elon Musk tell the head of the FAA to quit on Inauguration Day because the head of the FAA fined SpaceX close to $600,000 for violating safety procedures during their launches? So Elon Musk said, you need to go. You think that might be a reason FAA employees don't want to come back? Politico reporting the USDA, that would be the Department of Agriculture, is scrambling now to rehire all the bird flu experts that Elon Musk accidentally fired. Well, it's a good thing we don't have bird flu. We dodged a bullet. Because if this would be serious, if Elon Musk fired the people who were in charge of studying bird flu. But luckily, we don't have like anything going on that's spreading to cattle. Marjorie Taylor Greene says federal workers don't deserve to be paid. I know one federal worker doesn't deserve to be paid. You're looking at her. Well, Marjorie hasn't been the same when it comes to government ever since the FAA refused to do anything about those transgender drones she keeps saying over her home. She keeps calling the FAA and says they're transgender drones flying over my house. Do something about it. Well, Brian Glenn is a correspondent for the far-right Real America's Voice news organization. He's not a journalist, so he's allowed now inside the Oval Office. He was the one who asked President Zelensky on Friday, "Why don't you wear a suit?" unquote. He was the one who asked that question. Of course, if Zelensky showed up in a suit, they'd be saying the man's people are at war and he's wearing a $3,000 suit, right? You can't win. Well, that was Brian Glenn. He is with the far-right Real America's Voice news organization. These are the one on the right. He was allowed in the meeting, not Reuters, not the Associated Press, but Brian Glenn, and of course the Russian news agency TASS was allowed inside the meeting. A propaganda arm for Putin was allowed in the meeting, but not the Associated Press or Reuters. Well, Brian Glenn has been dating Marjorie Taylor Greene, the one who says government employees don't deserve to get paid. Brian Glenn, who asked the question, this is a picture of him. He's been dating Marjorie Taylor Greene for a little more than 2 years. This is a picture from a year and a half ago, the summer of 2023, when they went public with their relationship while they were hiking in Georgia. He posted a shirtless photo of himself with Marjorie, and on Twitter, they were hiking in the summer of 2023. Hey, he looks pretty good, right? Buff. I should look so good. Here he is on Marjorie Taylor's front porch in the autumn of that year, 2023, looking a little less buff. Perhaps it's beginning to sink in who he's dating. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a raw nerve of roid rage. Doesn't look so good, not like he did 3 months earlier when he and Marjorie first started seeing each other. Here is Brian Glenn, Marjorie's boyfriend, 7. What do the French say? You get the face you deserve. Here he is 7 months into his relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's 2024. He's out on the campaign trail covering the presidential election. I've been out on the road. Election years are tough. Bad food, long hours, no time to exercise. Brian Glenn not looking as good as he did less than a year earlier when he looked pretty buff. Again, this picture is Brian Glenn and Marjorie the first week into his relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and fewer than, 2 years? Here he is Friday, looking like he was force-fed a bad clam. A year and a half into his relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Brian Glenn goes from this to this. Instead of asking Zelensky why he isn't wearing a suit, Brian Glenn, why aren't you wearing a bag over your face? By the way, I didn't alter his face. Now, I tell you when I alter somebody's face. I did not do this. I promise you, I did not do this. I mean, if I wanted to alter his face, I would do this. And quite frankly, I think that's probably in about 2 more weeks when Marjorie's roid rage gets even worse. Okay? So if I wanted to alter his face, that's what I would do. And that's what he's eventually going to be looking like. From this to this is Marjorie Taylor Greene messing with his face, okay? This is me messing with his face, just so we're clear here, okay? You're listening to The Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share this with your friends. It's harder to find this show now, and I've accepted it. Platforms are throttling back this type of show. And so if you want to help me out, you'll copy and paste the link to this show and share it with, because this is an important show. Look at the important work. Who else spends 4 hours altering Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend's face? Huh? I do the important work. This is why they're trying to shut me up. So do all the things that, when you listen to other shows, all the things I ask you to do, please do it for me as well. Donald Trump says the Environmental Protection Agency's workforce is about to be slashed by 65%. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency exists thanks to Ralph Nader, by the way. The EPA, Google that, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, protects our environment. And that's a very large portfolio. Let's pick one sliver of the environment. Air pollution, okay? There's water pollution, there's pollution of our rivers, our oceans, our wetlands, our farmland. But let's just go with air pollution. Air pollution. Forget that it's been estimated air pollution in the United States causes tens of thousands of deaths each year from, among other things, heart attacks, strokes, and asthma. Forget that. Air pollution, just look at it from a purely economic standpoint. Air pollution is costing America's GDP $1 trillion a year in lost productivity. That's according to Ellis Robinson of Carnegie Mellon University. Now, you can believe Ellis Robinson from Carnegie Mellon University, or you might want to check out what Jimmy Dore has to say. Personally, I'm going to go with Ellis Robinson from Carnegie Mellon University. The Environmental Protection Agency's budget is $45 billion this year. $45 billion to protect our entire environment. I'm not talking, just air, right? I'm talking land, oceans, wetlands, rivers. I'm talking, when I talk about $1 trillion, that's just what air pollution costs our economy each year. $1 trillion. Air pollution, not water pollution, not the pollution of our land, just air pollution, $1 trillion. In what world does firing people who combat air pollution make economic sense? It doesn't. By gutting the EPA, You're just providing another subsidy to the oil companies. That's all you're doing. So they're less regulated. They have to pay fewer fines. Air pollution costs us $1 trillion a year. We spend $45 billion on protecting the environment. Greed, fear, ignorance, stupidity. That is MAGA's basic food group. And it destroys not just government and the environment, it destroys our economy. Again, I don't care right now about the tens of thousands of people who die each year from air pollution. I'm just talking about dollars and cents. Air pollution destroys jobs, costs us trillions. It's a disaster for every American except the ones who donate to Donald Trump, because they benefit temporarily from greed, fear, ignorance, and stupidity. Eventually it catches up with them. It always does. It will eventually destroy them and their idiot children. The Washington Post is reporting that USAID's acting deputy, this is an example of what I'm talking about. USAID's acting deputy inspector general, Mark Meyer, is hiding a report revealing the devastation caused by Trump's cutbacks to our government agency, that would be USAID, which is responsible for humanitarian aid. So the inspector general, according to an exclusive report in the Washington Post, is hiding this report. Why isn't he making it public? The Washington Post says this report on how cutbacks are threatening peace in the Sudan, in Gaza, this report is being kept from Donald Trump and Elon Musk for fear of retaliation and retribution. This is Hitler in the bunker crap. It's why dictators, authoritarians eventually fail. They destroy a lot of lives along the way, but they always fail because the people around them are terrified of bringing them bad news. And by the time an authoritarian discovers bad news, it's a disaster. It's the little thing that you didn't get looked at that's now a tumor. Too late. This is why Donald Trump, for example, looks the way he does. Nobody around him will ever say, really? You're going to go out in public like that? Cutting humanitarian aid is not just greedy, it's short-sighted and stupid. Forget about saving lives, right? I'm talking from a purely America First standpoint. Cutting humanitarian aid is stupid. Things go from bad to worst when the richest country in the history of civilization, a country, ours, that has sucked most of these poor countries completely dry, things get worse when the country that helped contribute to some of their poverty cuts off foreign assistance. It's bad business sense. Forget famine, forget the HEPFAR, AIDS patient, forget people dying because of this. I'm just talking dollars and cents with my MAGA friends. It's not cost effective to shut down USAID. Because when you shut down humanitarian aid, the next thing you know, we're sending in the military. When you shut down humanitarian aid, suddenly we're fighting wars because China is providing all the foreign aid, which means America can't access the natural resources inside those impoverished nations. natural resources, rare earth minerals that we need to keep this economy going. Okay? But this is MAGA stupidity. Isolationism and America first doesn't work because I need my coffee beans. And they're not growing enough coffee beans here in America. And I need to make sure the countries that grow my coffee beans, these countries that rely on child labor, yes, there's been reporting that Starbucks has children picking coffee beans in Central America. They have plausible deniability, but Channel 4 in the United Kingdom reported on this. But your Starbucks, my Starbucks coffee, my non-union burnt Starbucks coffee beans, according to Channel 4, some of them are picked by children. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about I need my caffeine. And these countries that give me my caffeine, I need them to have stable governments so my coffee beans arrive. And that means humanitarian aid. So the people, sometimes the children who pick my coffee beans in Central America, I don't want them to die. Okay? Forget education, having a childhood. Forget that. I'm an American. I just want my coffee beans. So I don't want those kids to die. I want them to be strong enough to pick my coffee beans. And that requires humanitarian assistance. We don't want them dying or rising up against the oligarch class in, say, Central America and shutting down the flow of my coffee beans. Not smart to cut off humanitarian aid. But Trump blames foreign aid for why Americans can't scrape together $500 for a medical emergency. That's what they want you to believe. The reason you can't get $500 together for a medical emergency, foreign aid. It's foreign aid. As though we're going to cut off foreign aid and suddenly there's going to be universal health care in America. That's what Trump is very good at doing to stupid Americans. And, you know, I'm beginning to believe we might have a few in this country. I know it's hard to believe. He is able to convince the MAGA morons. Poor countries are getting one past us. They're taking advantage of us. The people in the Sudan, the people in Gaza, the kids picking our beans in Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador, the people in Africa desperately in need of food, water, and HIV medicine, they're the ones who are taking advantage of us. Wow, we must be really stupid if they can get one past us. People who are dying from AIDS, malnutrition, dehydration, and they're still able to get one past us? We should be ashamed of ourselves. Well, by cutting off humanitarian aid, it's how David Feldman is going to end up without coffee beans or being forced to pay more for coffee beans. America is a $30 trillion a year economy. It means we produce $35 trillion a year worth of goods, services, assets. $30 trillion a year. $45 billion a year on humanitarian assistance out of a $30 trillion a year economy isn't even a drop in the bucket. It's like an atom in the bucket. And it's a great return on our investment. $45 billion, we get a $30 trillion a year economy. Because what are we doing? How did we get a $30 trillion economy? 1/3 of our economy, 2/3 of our economy is what the crap we buy, what the government buys and what consumers buy. Roughly about 1/3 of our economy is strip mining other countries and stealing their natural paying them for their natural resources, their lumber, rare earths, oil, and of course, coffee beans. And to make sure nobody turns off the spigot of all these necessary items that keep our economy growing, we sacrifice human rights on the altar of prosperity by propping up brutal dictators who strip their citizens, who are picking our coffee beans, of their freedom. And then, when they need to come here, because the country is overrun by death squads rounding up union organizers, we call it an invasion. We lend these countries money they can't possibly pay back, and then we force them to privatize government services in such a way that benefits Wall Street bankers, all the while blaming their citizens for needing humanitarian assistance. As George W. Bush once said, "Why do they hate us?" That's what he said before invading Iraq. Why does the world hate us? One would think foreign aid, $45 billion a year, would be a small price to pay for all that we get from the rest of the world. Steal. Less than 1% of America's entire federal budget is $45 billion. Less than $45 billion, less than 1% of the budget to keep our economy humming, and more importantly, to keep our soldiers out of harm's way. Because every dollar you spend on humanitarian aid is $100 not spent sending our soldiers off to fight inside a country whose natural resources we need. That's why President John F. Kennedy created USAID. So to stabilize countries in need so they wouldn't fall under the Soviet sphere of influence, so we wouldn't have to fight wars in countries that are suffering, that are suddenly turning to Marxism because Russia's offering something that we're not. Humanitarian aid creates stability in regions and makes the people who live there less prone to toppling their governments, which means fewer civil wars, and fewer civil wars overseas means we don't have to send our soldiers, or as Smedley Butler once called them, our gangsters for capitalism, into the region to protect Wall Street profits. Okay? That's how it works. Not talking about saving lives. I'm just talking dollars and cents. But why would you expect Donald Trump, who went bankrupt 6 times, to understand any of this? The genius, Elon Musk, who'd be nothing without our federal government's assistance, he's insisting USAID is, quote, a criminal organization that needs to die, unquote. So send one of your kids. When we have to go fight a war because we didn't send humanitarian aid, send one of your 14 children to go fight that war, Elon Musk. He welcomed his 14th child over the weekend. Siobhan Zillis gave him his 14th child. That doesn't seem efficient. 14 children, not cost effective. 14 children with 4 or 5 separate women he's not married to. And yet, the evangelical Christians have no problem with this guy. The woman who gave him his 14th child, I think this is the 3rd child she's given him. She is with Neuralink. They are the people planting chips inside your skull. Neuralink. Musk owns Neuralink. It's regulated by the FDA, which, as luck would somehow have it, is now regulated by Elon Musk. How odd that the guy sticking chips in our brains is regulating the regulators. This is a guy who believes in transhuman evolution. He believes this. You want to put your fate in the hands of somebody who believes there are humans and then transhumans. And by transhumans, I don't mean his daughter, who he stopped talking to. He's talking about ketamine-induced superiority that comes, gene editing, gene splicing, Neuralink chips in your brain. This is the singularity. He wants a new type of human where you make a choice. Will you become one with the machines? That's where he's going. And the ones who are not willing to embrace the singularity in his fevered mind, they deserve to die off like the dinosaurs. This is evolution. This is what he believes. This is what he believes. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Please share this episode. Why wouldn't you share this? I'm filled with nothing but love and optimism. Where am I? A California judge blocked some of Elon Musk's mass firings on Friday, calling them probably illegal. Probably? In his ruling, the judge temporarily rescinded the firing of probationary employees inside nearly 24 federal agencies. This is some good news. But it remains to be seen if their jobs will ever be reinstated or if they'll even want to come back. As I said earlier, Musk is having trouble getting FAA staffers, the people who keep your plane in the air. They don't want to come back to work for the federal government. People, I guess abuse, not a great way to entice people. 200,000, there we go. Did I do it? Yeah, 200,000 federal employees are classified as probationary, making them the easiest to fire. If you've been hired in the first year or two, if you got a promotion, or if you were transferred to another agency, you're probationary, you're the easiest to fire. So far, tens of thousands of probationary employees have been fired from agencies that protect our national parks, our air, our water, collect our taxes, and fight our wars. There is no greater profession than the civil service. There's nothing more noble than working for government. The Associated Press reporting the Social Security Administration laid off 7,000 employees and is now planning to fire 50% of its entire workforce. That's the plan for Social Security, the Social Security Administration, to fire 50% of its workforce. That's not going to save money. The problem with Social Security isn't its employees. Elon Musk, that's not the problem. The problem you have is Social Security works perfectly. That's the problem Elon Musk has. The problem Elon Musk and Project 2025 and Donald Trump have is Social Security is beloved. Ask your grandparents. Those checks arrive on time every month, and once they die, they stop. You got a huge problem on your hands, Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. The problem is Social Security is sacred. Americans know that. It keeps them alive, keeps grandma alive. That's the problem Trump has. And he wants to give a $4 trillion tax cut to the richest 1%. How do you solve the problem of Social Security being part of what makes America great? You destroy it. You cut half the number of employees so checks don't arrive on time. The elderly become frightened and confused and have trouble figuring out what happened to their check. You ruin Social Security so people come to hate instead of love it. You fire half the people who work there so Americans end up agreeing with paid Republican shills who lie and say government can't do anything right. Government can't do anything right. Elon Musk had no problem with government when he took $38 billion from it. That continuing resolution, keeping our government open, expires on March 14th. Speaker Mike Johnson says we're looking at a government shutdown. Why? Because the Democrats don't want to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. He's okay with all of this. Mike Johnson is okay with all of this and still insists he's a devout Christian. Which did I not? Is there a New Testament that the apostles put together that I didn't get to see? How are you a Christian? Well, Donald Trump likes us to believe he's a tough guy. When he said to Zelensky, I expect you to be a tough guy, But he's actually terrified of real tough guys like Vladimir Putin or Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. The mask Trump wore in the Oval Office on Friday when he went after Zelensky, that mask disguised a frightened little man who needs to show people he's tough because they ain't going to figure it out by themselves. This is what every parent tells their son or daughter. If you're tough, you don't have to act tough. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said of Trump's performance, quote, "This new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. It largely aligns with our vision." Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said, quote, "The visit of the head of the neo-Nazi regime, Vladimir Zelensky, to Washington on February 28th is a complete political and diplomatic failure of the Kiev regime," unquote. She kept calling him a neo-Nazi. Well, Zelensky's not a neo-Nazi. I know that because Trump threw him out of the Oval Office. Hungary's Viktor Orban now calling for the EU to negotiate peace with Putin. And that is a bit of a departure from Trump. Orban is in the pocket of Putin. The EU is threatening to kick Hungary out because it's been against providing weapons to Ukraine. Orban gets money from Putin, but he now is saying the EU should negotiate with Putin. That is a departure from Donald Trump, who right now only wants bilateral negotiations, leaving Europe and Ukraine out of it. On Saturday, Republican Senator from Utah, Mike Lee, called on Donald Trump to pull out of the UN and NATO. The John Birch Society is alive and doing better now than it did in the 50s. Bill Buckley had to purge the conservative movement of these people, the John Birchers, and they now are running the Republican Party. No, they're getting rid of fluoride in the water. The John Birchers won. They won the Republican Party, even though paleo-conservatives like Bill Buckley purged them, as did Nixon. It was Ronnie Reagan who kind of let the John Birchers in through the back door. Mike Lee calling on Trump to pull out of the UN and NATO. You know, if we were going to get socialized medicine, if all the money we saved protecting Europe meant socialized medicine, maybe I could be on board. Not going to happen. Not with these people. This money that they tell us they're going to save by not being a part of NATO or the UN, where do you think that money goes? Do you think it goes to the people who can't come up with $500 for a medical emergency? Elon Musk heard Senator Lee's call to pull out of Europe, took to Twitter and said of Lee's statement, I agree. Elon Musk is calling on America to pull out of the UN and NATO. The odious Vice President J.D. Vance and his family, they went on a ski vacation in Vermont, which got ruined on the weekend by protesters. Vance on Friday tag-teamed Zelensky, demanding he apologize to Donald Trump and then thank him for all the weapons Joe Biden gave Ukraine. That's basically, why aren't you thanking President Trump for the Javelin anti-tank missiles that Joe Biden gave you? You should be thanking Donald Trump for that. Pro-Ukrainian activists created a 1-mile line as Vance and his family drove into Vermont's Sugar Bush Resort. What's he doing in Vermont? Not a good... See, this is geography. This is the guy who wants us to pull out of NATO, thinks Vermont would be a friendly place for him. Idiot. The New York Post reporting hundreds of protesters heckled Vance and his family on the slopes, forcing them to move to an undisclosed location. EU Foreign Secretary Kaja Kallas said of the meeting between Zelensky and Trump, quote, now the free world needs a new leader. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier said, quote, I never thought the day would come where we would have to protect Ukraine from the United States, unquote. Hey, I never thought the day would come that I'd feel safer living in Germany. I have a kid who speaks fluent German and lived there for about 3 years and keeps telling me, you should move there. Zelensky followed up the Trump-Vance ambush by meeting with the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Starmer assured Zelensky of Britain's full backing. And on Sunday, Keir Starmer, Labour Party, convened a meeting of 18 leaders from Europe, leaders from Great Britain and Canada, to meet with Zelensky and promise him more weapons and more financial aid. Even the fascist Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, showed up and promised to support Ukraine. King Charles then welcomed President Zelensky on a visit to Sandringham. That's a castle Queen Victoria bought for her son Edward. This is Zelensky visiting King Charles, and then Zelensky said, let's have a few shots of vodka, and this is how the place ended looking like. This was before the vodka, after the vodka, and then it was off to 10 Downing Street, where they got shit-faced. All right, playing with Photoshop. Little AI. There's a little AI here. Hang on, where am I? Little Little AI there. You can, actually with AI now, you can like highlight, anyway. Except for the fact that AI is going to get us all killed, it can be fun. On Sunday, the liar and Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said, quote, "I think Vladimir Putin is an old school communist." You stupid hick. This was his way of attacking Vladimir Putin. He says this is what Mike Johnson, the stupid hick from Louisiana. This is what he said. He's not to be trusted and he's dangerous. And Elon Musk was willing to admit Russia was the aggressor. Mike Johnson is a liar. So he'll say one thing to please Trump and another thing to please the viewers of CNN. This is how he's lasted so long as speaker. I think Vladimir Putin is an old school communist. Yeah, I mean, I get Lenin off Putin. I mean, Putin, they say, is the richest man in the world. That he stole more than $1 trillion from his people. Yeah, he's an old school communist. James Lankford from Oklahoma, according to the New York Times, he's a Republican from Oklahoma. He called Putin, quote, "a murderous KGB thug and a dictator." But that wasn't a compliment. You would think a Republican calling Putin a murderous KGB thug and dictator. He's a tough guy. Wasn't a compliment. The Times says Lankford told Meet the Press he understands why Zelensky told Trump he doesn't trust Putin. Lankford, anyway, I'm going to do another show. I got so much stuff to go over. And Republicans do not keep you safe. They just scare you into thinking they will. What they do is they create things you shouldn't be scared of, and then when that thing doesn't happen, they say, well, we kept you safe from the thing that wasn't ever going to hurt you. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going to do another show tomorrow night, I hope. I've got a lot to cover. I mean, there's just so much going on. Please share this with your friends. Spent some time working on an imaging campaign for my show. This is my nephew Leonard, except for the fact that it says the David Ferdman Show, Leonard for some reason, but I do think that's pretty good. Good job, Leonard. Do we have something else he did? Leonard was working all weekend for me. Do we want to show? You know, my mother, this is true. My mother communicated to me through food. She was bad with words, and this is how she would tell me things, like through soup this is how she told me Grandpa died. That's how I found out my grandfather died. I got a bowl of alphabet soup that said, "There's been an accident." And what's the other one? Oh, Raj. That's how I found out my cat died. Raj is no longer. That's how she was bad communicating. She talked to me through soup. That's how. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. I read all your comments. So, again, I make mistakes. I misspeak. I do. I get worked up, and sometimes I'll say Putin when I mean to say Zelensky. So thank you for correcting me when I make these mistakes. If I get anything wrong, let me know. I will. Thank you to the people who caught the Don Jr. AI hack. I fell for it, so thank you for that. I will correct any mistakes here, but I'm telling you, 99% of what I tell you 99.9999% of what I tell you is true. I invite you to Google everything I say. Thank you. Going to try to do a show tomorrow. Please share this episode. It's getting harder for shows like this to be seen. You know why. Thank you.